Once upon a time there was a wise and curious king who was deeply troubled by 3 questions that no one in his vast kingdom could answer to his satisfaction. His first question was, is God one, or are there many gods? His second question was, if God exists, where does he live, and how can one find him? And his third question was, what does God do? The king summoned the scholars, saints, and wise men of his land. Each came with his own answer, filled with logic, scriptures, and philosophy. Yet none could satisfy the king's heart. One day, while riding his horse through the countryside, the king saw a saintly man walking calmly along the road. The saint looked different from other holy men. His face glowed with peace, and his presence carried quiet wisdom. The king felt drawn to him and approached respectfully. The king asked, "O Holy One, please answer my 3 questions. Is God one or many? Where does he live, and how can he be found? And what does God do?" The saint looked at the king and smiled. "My son," he said gently, "this is not the way to ask. You are sitting high on your horse while I stand on the road. That is not the proper manner to question a seeker of truth. First, offer me a place to stay and some rest, and then ask your questions with humility." The king immediately realized his mistake. He brought the saint to a small garden near his palace where there was a quiet cottage. The saint was given food, water, and all comforts. 2 days later, the king returned and said, "Father, please answer my 3 questions now." The saint replied, "Do you want to hear the answers alone or before everyone?" The king said, "It would be best if everyone hears them. That way all can learn together." The saint agreed. "Then gather your people. When everyone is assembled, call me. Until then, do not disturb me." The king agreed. A date was fixed, 1 month later. Messengers were sent across the kingdom to invite everyone. The saint spent that month in peace, praying, meditating, and walking through the royal garden. Finally, the day arrived. The court was filled with ministers, soldiers, priests, and townsfolk. The saint was brought to the royal hall. The king offered him a throne to sit on, but the saint said, "No, I shall sit on the ground. Truth belongs to the humble." The king folded his hands and said, "Father, my first question, is God one or many?" The saint smiled and said, "Your Majesty, I am just a simple monk. I do not know much. But you are an educated man. You know how to count, do you not? Bring some gold coins." The king ordered a servant to bring a tray of gold coins. The saint said, "Now count them aloud." The king picked up the first coin. "1," he said. The saint nodded. "Yes, that's true." The king placed it aside, took another coin and said, 2. The saint stopped him and asked, "Tell me, how many coins are in your hand?" The king said, "Only 1. "Then why do you say 2? Asked the saint. The king smiled awkwardly. "That's how counting is done." The saint said, "Indeed, that's how numbers are written. But in your hand, there is always just 1 coin. Each time you hold one, you name it differently, but it is always 1. The king nodded thoughtfully. The saint continued, "In the same way, God is always one. But those who experience him in different ways call him by many names. One sees him once and calls him one. Another sees him twice and thinks there are 2. But in truth, there is only one divine being." The king bowed his head. "Truly, Father, I understand now that God is one." "Now," said the king, "please answer my second question. Where does God live, and how can one find him?" The saint smiled. "Hearing your question makes me hungry. Can you bring me a glass of milk first?" The king ordered milk to be brought. When the glass arrived, the saint dipped his finger into it and began stirring slowly. The king was puzzled. "Father, what are you doing?" The saint said, "I heard that there is ghee, clarified butter, inside milk, so I am trying to take it out." The king laughed. "Father, you cannot get ghee like that. You must first turn the milk into curd, then churn it to make butter, and then heat the butter to get ghee." The saint nodded. "Exactly. Ghee is indeed within the milk, but it cannot be seen until one follows the proper process. He placed the glass down and said gently, "In the same way, God is everywhere, within everything and everyone. But to realize him, you must follow the spiritual process: faith, devotion, discipline, and meditation. Only then will you find him, just as ghee is found from milk." The king was deeply moved. "Your words are full of wisdom, Father." Then the king asked his last question. "And now, please tell me, what does God do?" The saint looked at him and said quietly, "Let me ask you first, who is the teacher now, you or me?" The king said, "You are my teacher." "Then how is it," said the saint, "that you sit on a throne while I sit on the ground?" The king immediately stood up and said, "Forgive me, Father." He stepped down from his throne and asked the saint to sit there instead. The saint sat on the throne and the king sat humbly on the floor. After a few moments of silence, the saint said, "This is what God does. He raises the humble and lowers the proud. He makes a beggar a king and a king a beggar. God's work is to balance the world and give everyone the fruit of their actions." Tears filled the king's eyes. He folded his hands and said, "Today I have found the answers to all my 3 questions." The saint blessed the king and quietly left the palace, disappearing into the unknown, leaving behind wisdom that would live in the king's heart forever. Moral of the story: God is one. He is everywhere, but only devotion, humility, and right action can help us realize him. And he alone governs the world through justice and balance.